Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zach. My co-host today is Sean. We're going to be we're going to be taking a look at the Bulletin Live Designer and all of its modules, purposes, features, functionality, the whole 9 yards. We're going to be taking a look at start to finish, everything that you guys need to know for reviewing the bulletin settings, creating your new bulletins, managing the content in those bulletins, how you review them and send them to your recipients, and general archival and management processes after the fact. So I'm going to be taking us through today to get started. I just want to make one more good reminder. Down at the bottom of your interface, you should be able to use the Q&A button. So if you guys have any questions or questions at all, Sean will be seeing through to those the entire time. This webinar is being recorded, just like the statement on our slide here, and we will have these available at a later date. So let's go ahead and get started here. I am here in our club's website for our demo today, and we're going to be going through each of the different stages of our Bulletin Live Designer and getting more familiar with the system, and also, again, going really in depth with some of these features and functionality. So I am a site administrator. I have full access to this account, but just so everyone's aware, to be able to send bulletins, you need, at the club level, you need a level 60 access. This will let you build bulletins and send them out. This is also the same level of access that you will need to create any content that you would need for the bulletin. So 60 is that access level. Anyone who is 60 or better, so that's 60, 50, 40, and 30 all have full access to the bulletin system. There are several different ways to head in there. Today, I'm going to use the new bulletin tab and then manage bulletins. But of course, on our administrative dashboard here, we can come down to the communication portion, and there is a send bulletins, which will send us right into creating a new bulletin, as well as some other links here that will either send you to the Bulletin Live, the bulletin homepage, or you can view your send history and you're managing your blocked emails. So once again, we're going to scroll up to the top here. We're going to click New Bulletin Beta. It is already selected, and we're going to go ahead and click on Manage Bulletins. This is going to bring us to the Bulletin Live Designer homepage. And currently you can see I've come here. There's this nice big section in the center that addresses me. It welcomes me back. It gives me some quick jump in options. And I can also dismiss this box if I no longer need to see it anymore. Here we can see some of our most recent bulletins, and we have lots of good jumping off points like creating bulletins, viewing all of our bulletins, viewing our settings, groups, and templates, and as well as our send history and stats. So as I mentioned, or as it was on our title card right before we got started here, we're going to be jumping directly into talking about bulletin options, the send history and bulletin groups before we get on a little bit further. So with that said, we're going to dive right into the bulletin settings, which you can access from this quick links here under settings, or on the left-hand side of the page. You can also click this settings group and it will take you into the bulletin settings area. So in the bulletin settings, some of these settings are for you. As you can see, these display preferences, others are for the account. So you can see here, we have our default bulletin options, and we can change once these bulletins have been created, we can always change these, but these are our safe defaults that every time we create a new bulletin, these are the settings that they will inherit by default. So by default, if we create a new bulletin, it will go into the general group. We'll talk a little bit more about bulletin groups in just a minute. We can also choose whether or not by default these bulletins are visible on the website. So when you create a bulletin and you've published it for the first time, it will go on the website. And of course, once it's been archived, it'll also be able to be visible on the website. For some customers, you guys may choose to, you don't want your bulletins visible up until the point that you've either published them or have already sent them. So you could change the setting to no. Most people do, most customers do end up using the yes option. As far as access, this is public, so anyone who has a link to view that bulletin can see it, or requires login, means that you have to be a member of the club and you'll have to log in to see the content of the bulletin outside of the content that was delivered to you directly in your email. And our last setting for our bulletins, at least for the default options, is showing the commitments. So commitments are things like you being signed up for volunteering events, committee, if you have any committee responsibilities, if you have anything in your duty roster, all of those things will show up under commitments. And of course, you can choose whether or not they show in those bulletins. If the commitments, if you send your bulletin to anyone who is not a member of the club, even with the show commitments option on, they will never see this section because the show commitments is limited only to members, because your members have those relationships. They're signed up for event planner events, they're signed up for my event runner events, they're signed up for volunteers or any of their committees. But I'm going to go ahead and leave that as no. Actually, we'll go ahead and turn that on and we'll come back and we'll see how that looks. And then we can return and make a change later if we want. The default send options, once again, when we get to the send page at the end of the system, these are some of the options that are going to be checked by default. So auto archive means as soon as I send it, and I'll have this option on the screen, but when I go to send by default, the system will ask me if I want to archive it, and the option will be yes. I do strongly encourage auto archive, as long as you know that you won't make any further changes to the bulletin. The reason we strongly encourage auto archive is that when you're done and you send the bulletin, it's been archived, there's nothing further for you to do, and there's no extra work to be done. You can always, of course, choose to archive it at a later date, and we will be talking about that at the end of our webinar. But if you choose to not auto archive, you will have to manually come back into ClubRunner and archive the bulletin. And we'll talk about, like I said, we'll talk about archival more towards the end, but we do strongly encourage it, but obviously not required. And then send a copy to the sender. This just means you'll also receive a copy should you not be part of any of the distribution groups that are going to receive the email. You can always include yourself in the copy. And for our last grouping here is our display preferences, and these are only affect your own user when you're using the system. So when you go to create a new bulletin, we have a default template tab. You can choose the samples, the blanks, or the club's personal templates. Any one of those are fine. And of course, you can come back here and change it at any point in time. And then for our display panel, this is for our welcome screen, is the welcome, the recent bulletins, and the learning resources. I'm going to go ahead and turn all three of these off so you guys can see what it will change. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. This should return us to the bulletin home, and you will see that there's a lot less information going on here now. So I'm going to head back to the settings because I would like more of those options here. I am going to show the recent bulletin and the learning resources, but I will leave the welcome off because I don't need the big button anymore. And now that we're back here, we've lost our big button about, welcome back and coming in here. And if we were ready, we could dive in and start doing more with our bulletins. But there's a little bit more with our bulletin groups that I want to talk about before bulletin settings, our send history and our groups. So let's dive into that. So heading back into our settings here, let's go ahead and talk about send history. So every single time your club sends out a bulletin, even the test bulletins, they will be recorded in our send history. And they're also part of the email traffic report for the club as well. But every email, for the most part, that goes out of ClubRunner will have statistics associated with it. And we could also view the state of the bulletin when it was sent out. So if I go and I view this bulletin, for example, you can see that my little Latin translate popped up there because this is just a bunch of Latin junk text. Someone was probably testing something on this account. We do use this account for demos, but this is the bulletin that they sent out. I can go ahead and close this. If I wanted to see the statistics, so this is the same one, I can click on the stats button and it will show me who the emails were sent to. Send history is really great just to know when any of your bulletins were sent, the time they were sent, and the recipients that were there. If for any reason you have scheduled a bulletin to go out in the future, it will also be part of this send history page. And you can, of course, see all of your stats. So if you ever have a circumstance where you've sent yourself a couple test emails, they don't appear to be arriving, coming to the send history page and checking for your test emails will let you know whether or not we've processed them and whether or not they've been delivered, arrived, etc. So this is our send history page. Moving on, we're going to take a look at the bulletin groups next. You should think of bulletin groups as a way to classify the types of bulletins that the club is sending out. By default, almost all customers will have a general, or quite literally a general purpose bulletin group. It is just the default group in the system. Sometimes people will create a bulletin group per year, but that really won't work because we do limit bulletin groups to up to 5 groups is the maximum for our customers right now. So you should think about these bulletin groups more as distribution channels or additional features. So for example, let's say you guys send out a members only bulletin. It should never be visible to anyone but the members of the club, and some of the information in there might be sensitive. So you would more than likely want to add a group, private members only bulletins. That's what I'm going to go ahead and call this group. Now, I don't want this to be visible on the website, so I can turn that off. But if I want it to be visible on the website, but only available to our members, I can choose requires login. And only if you were logged in would you be able to see this bulletin on the website. But in this case, I don't want it to be visible to anyone. I don't even want members to be able to see it on the website. I want anyone who's getting this bulletin to have to log in outside of receiving it in their email. Now, as a part of bulletin groups, we also have an email greeting. So in this one, I am going to put some customization. So I've added just a little description right into the center of our bulletin here. And you guys, in a minute, when I select from this bulletin and set this group, you'll be able to see where this shows up. So I'm pretty happy with it. The only other thing I want to do is I want to bold it, I want to underline it, and I'm going to go ahead and set a text color of red. So hopefully anyone who stumbles upon this will see it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And we've now created our private members only bulletin group. And once again, we now have 3 groups. So we have our general group, we have our non-members group, and we have our private members only group. So as I was mentioning about bulletins being distribution channels, we do have those options like being visible on the website and whether or not they're requiring login. These settings here from the group override the individual bulletin settings, or at the very least, think about it like this. If you've set the bulletin group not to be visible on the website, it doesn't matter that the bulletin has been set to be visible on the website because the group has been disabled, so that bulletin will also not be visible on the website. As far as the login feature, if you set it to requires login, it's always going to require a login, but the member only bulletins will only, like with the way we have it configured now, they'll only show up once we're logged in and visible. So we've talked about our settings and our send history where we can take a look at our past. And we've talked about our bulletin groups, which is our distribution channels for our bulletin and how we're going to classify our bulletins. So let's jump right into creating a new bulletin and getting started. So each week when you go to create a bulletin, it should be pretty straightforward process of either reusing a template that you've already created or potentially copying your previous week bulletin. In most cases, you should not need to set up a new bulletin each week. You're going to, again, reuse the work that you've done in the past. So you can see that we have a couple bulletins here. This one is open, which means it hasn't been archived, it's not gone, or otherwise unmodified. It's still modifiable, I guess is the right word we want to talk about there. And then we have this bulletin 2 columns and bulletin single column with image header. And you can see when I hover over here for just a minute, it says copy. And the reason it says copy is it's a past bulletin, but if I copy it, I can copy all of the content and items that were in it and get started with it basically from my last week's bulletin or the last bulletin I worked with, or I can go ahead and create a new one. So I'm going to assume a lot of customers are starting off with brand new bulletins this year, or maybe they want to really think about changing it. So let's go through creating a brand new bulletin from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and click this giant create bulletin button here. And you can see that we have an assortment of different club bulletins, all in this case, all Rotary focused. So new members to the club, membership campaigns, a happy holidays, social media, membership news. These are all templates. And looking through any of these, if I was really happy with one of these templates, I could click it. If I wanted to get a better view of it, I can hit preview instead. And After a moment here, the system will basically take show me what that bulletin will look like when I go ahead and get started. Shouldn't take too much longer here to load, hopefully. There it goes. So you can see here, this is a preview of what the bulletin will look like when we get started. And I know I mentioned commitments earlier. This is what's going to show up for members, not non-members. And let's just say I don't like this bulletin. So at first I thought, oh, this would be really great. Now I'm not so sure. So I can look around at all of these other bulletins, and I'm not happy with any of these. I can also look at any of our blank templates. And these are mostly, these are a little bit less featureful, and they typically just have like good starting places, but they're very easily customizable. And of course, we have our last group here, which would be my templates. These are the club's templates. So you can see that we have a few templates. And looking at these, I'm not happy with any of them. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a blank template, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this single column with image header template to go ahead and get started. So I've selected it. If I wanted to, I could preview it. But now that I'm ready, I can click next, either up at the top or up at the bottom. And so what is happening right now, as soon as I click next, the system is copying that template, putting all of the content and widgets from the template into our account, and then creating that bulletin so we can start working with it. Usually doesn't take too long, but I feel like I've angered the ClubRunner gods right now. Hopefully it'll go through pretty quickly here. There we go. So I've now got our bulletin and I'm ready to start working with it. Before we jump too much into the content, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the bigger things that will impact the bulletin more. So we're going to talk about themes, the layouts, and the properties, and then we're going to come back and talk about content. So for each bulletin, you probably won't change this every single time that you're working with a bulletin. You'll probably pick a theme and stick with it, but we do have lots of themes available in different colors and assortments. So we have a leadership theme. We have a leadership compact. Compact here implying that there's a lot less padding and spacing. We have our minimalist and minimalist compact, and these bulletins are, these layouts and color palettes are our newest and most modern, and I would strongly encourage them. And then we have a handful of older bulletin themes and layouts as well. So airmail, brochure, classic, contemporary corners, the plain theme, our Rotary International theme, our simple theme, and our white theme. By far and large, I find that minimalist and leadership, both the compact ones, are probably our most used newer bulletins. I really like them because they're very clean, they're very concise, and the compact ones tend to have the most space for things to float around it. So if you want to take a look at your bulletin and see how it'll look like in different themes, selecting on any of the little color swatches will swap your bulletin to that theme and that color palette. And as you can see here, every time I choose one, you can see that the text and the formatting and the design of the bulletin continues to change. Colors get modified, etc. So look through all of your themes, choose the one that makes the most sense for you guys, and if you're happy with it, you're good to go. So I'm going to go into the minimalist here. I'm going to select, let's see, how about this blue, white, and gray guy? This looks very similar to what we just had, but I like it. It's simple, it's straightforward. We obviously do have lots of other good colors. If we were doing something, you know, we needed a little bit more color, or maybe we needed something closer to cranberry. If we were dealing with our, like for a Rotaract club, we do have those other colors available. But I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to the default blue, gray, and white here. And we're gonna move on to our layouts. So layouts control all of the places that we're allowed to put content in new widgets into our bulletins. I would definitely strongly encourage any of these layouts that have the little star asterisk, and any of the bulletins that say responsive. These layouts means that they should be more responsive for any of our email clients that support responsive emails. And the really nice thing is it means that if it arrives and the email client supports it, it will actually work a lot like our live websites do. There's still a little bit of not every browser and email client supports email responsiveness the same, but we do our best to make sure that it's supported in the widest number. So let's go ahead and choose this 2-column layout with a header and different sections. So you can see that as soon as I clicked the layout here, it moved all of our widgets from the primary section, and it's still in the primary section, but we also have this right-hand column here now. And of course, we could click through and change to any of our layouts, the ones that we wanted. So for example, if we wanted to return more to what we started with, we could head back to this header full width single section, and you can see we get a lot more space. But effectively, you can switch to whichever layout you want. Your content should mostly stay intact. For example, if I move back to our left and right sidebar here, if there was content in my right sidebar, that would go away. It's not deleted, it's just no longer on the bulletin. So you can switch and swap between your bulletins. But for example, if you were going to switch from this style, like this 2-column layout to a single column layout, I would probably make sure I dragged all my widgets from the right column into the main column before I did the switch. Our last section we have is properties. A lot of these settings you'll be able to change again before you send the bulletin out, but some good things to observe here: the name of the bulletin, which is going to be the name that shows up for your end users as well as your club members. So club, let's see, Club News July. We'll give it a nice, simple, straightforward message. We're going to leave the bulletin date as July 26th. We don't need a bulletin code here. That's part of new upcoming functionality that actually won't have any impact here, so we can ignore that entirely. We are going to leave this in the general group. For the editor, we will go ahead and put Kevin Turner, who is that was very weird. I know I'm logged in as Kevin. Let me grab up the last name. There we go. I must have done something. So we're going to put our editor name and email in there, and then we're going to have our subject. I'm going to change the subject to match our name of our bulletin, Club News July. For this individual bulletin, we're setting it to show on the website. We will not show commitments, and it will be a public bulletin. Anytime you change any of the properties in the bulletin, it's very important to use this save button down at the bottom. As soon as you save, the bulletin will be updated and it will be reflected immediately. For some reason, if you don't click save here and you navigate away or you choose save and exit, it will discard your bulletin property. So make sure you do save before you navigate off of the properties tab. So we'll come back to this text section in a few minutes. Let's switch back to the content so we can start going over how you build and design your actual bulletin. So right away, for most users, you're going to have this pre-formatted group automatically expanded unless you've been in here working with the designer in the past. And pre-formatted widgets are really great. They're great for straightforward, simple things. All of these sections like article with image left, this pre-formatted widget is going to do exactly what it says it does. And just to show that off, I'm going to click, drag, and hold, and then I'm going to drop right at the top so I can insert that there. So you can see that almost immediately after I drop the widget, it is in place here. And we would be in a good spot to start putting some content in that widget and really fleshing it out a little bit more. Give me just 1 second here. All right, so let's go ahead and populate our caption here. So Club News July edition. Let's put in, I'm just going to use some generic, it's called lorem ipsum. It's just junk text. It's to fill things out and make it so that we have something that looks like there's content in there instead of just a box with random words that I type in. So we're going to go ahead and get that in there. I will go ahead and click on hovering over the widget. So I kind of jumped in there very quickly and I apologize. So anytime you guys are working with your pre-formatted widgets, when you hover over them, you'll see that the box turns gray. intending that you can interact with this widget and move it around. You can also interact with all the different parts of it. So very straightforwardly, this widget has a grab point. Clicking, holding, I can drag and drop and move this widget between the different boxes and sections. Dropping it, it will fill in its space and drop right in. Hovering it over again, any of the widget areas on the screen that I hover over, I will get a set of tools. These tools will allow me to interact with the widget and make any changes to them. So for example, if I needed to change the title, I can click over the title section, click on the pencil, and as soon as I click into it, I can make changes. So I need there to be a little dash there, not a big change, but that is definitely what I want. And I want to change this to red also. And you can see that as soon as I clicked out of it, that change was saved. It's saved immediately. If we came and we come back in, it'll still be there. And it's the same for clicking and working with any of the other sections. Clicking into it, I can start immediately making changes, typing new text, etc. So for example, we'll make this first section bold. We'll make the second section here italic, and we'll make the last section here underlined. And that is that. So if I didn't need to make any other changes to this text, I'm good. I'll click out, so it'll save my changes. Here is a image widget. So as part of this pre-formatted widget, we have an image section. Hovering over it, we have a couple different options. We can remove the image that's currently in there, which is just a placeholder image. We can edit the image to change its location, or we can look at the properties. We'll go ahead and start with the edit button, which will pop up our image finder. And this will let us look at any of the images that are already in the ClubRunner library. If we had new photos that we wanted to upload from our computer, we could use the upload button, pick any of the files off of our computer we needed, add them into ClubRunner, and then continue to move forward. So I'm going to go ahead and use this club logo that we've got set up here. And you can see that that's slotted right into the page. And then last, we do have this button. I'll hover over it and click on the properties so we can configure it. I want it to bring him to the club's homepage. Go ahead and hit save, and that widget is set up. Now, I jumped right into that widget. Let's take a quick step back and talk about all of our different pre-formatted widgets. We have a text-only widget. It works exactly like this section of our pre-formatted widget here that's a little bit more complex in that it will give us a text area, it'll give us an editor with all of our tools, but it won't have any other placeholders for any content. Moving along, we have an image with a caption. Actually, this is that widget right here. As you can see, there is one image and one space for a caption. We also have a single button widget, which works just like the bottom of this article with a left image widget, allowing you to customize it and control where it goes to. We have a reverse of this widget as well, which is the article is on the left and the image is on the right. We have a triple column above text widget, which is great if you want to have 3 images in a row with captions below them. So if you wanted to create like a little media gallery to show in your bulletin, go ahead and close that. If you don't need an article style layout and you just want text with an image to the left or the right, we have those as well. Much like the triple image above text, we also have a triple column widget. And we have a double column text widget, which is very similar to the triple, except it's 2 instead of 3. The most important thing when we're looking at all of these different widgets here is anytime you see a plus sign, that means you are creating a brand new widget. Whereas if you see a magnifying glass, you are reusing a widget that already exists in the system and you can place it multiple times. So I can actually drag and drop that same widget over and over again if I want to, and it'll allow me to reuse that widget multiple times on the same page. So now that we're done talking about all of our pre-formatted widgets, if I click on this gray bar at the top, it will collapse that group of widgets so we can look at all of the other widget groups. So here we have our essentials widgets, which expanding this, we have things like our club meeting information, the list of our executives and directors, a list of bulletin stories and bulletin news, download files for the bulletin, photo albums for the bulletin, These are collections of links, and in case of the download files, it would be a collection of download files for this bulletin, or for the photo albums, a collection of photo albums that have been assigned to this bulletin. The same is true with our bulletin pages and site pages. There's also an automatic list of birthdays and anniversaries based on the data that is in ClubRunner, and a message from the president, which will automatically include the president's name, a photo of them if any exists, and a message from the club that you guys can customize. Further down, we have our links widgets. Links widgets are great if you guys have a collection of links that are going to be the same every week or change very infrequently, or you want to provide some navigation. Links widgets are great for that. You can think of links widgets as a manual collection of links instead, by comparison to bulletin pages or site pages. These are only collections of bulletin pages, custom pages, or site pages just for the bulletin. Whereas the links widget, you could have a link to the club homepage, to your photo albums, to your website, to your district's website, anything and everything and anything basically was what a link widget will let you do. We also have our event widgets, so a list of our upcoming speakers, a list of our upcoming events, and any meeting responsibilities if they've been configured by the club. In our bulletin and PR group, we have our bulletin editor information, a link, a widget that'll allow us users to subscribe to the bulletin if they want to. A collection of rotary links that ClubRunner manages. We occasionally get questions about how clubs can change these links, and the answer is that right now they can't. If for any reason you want to customize this set of links, you would be much better off creating your own links widget and managing the links through there. And our last section is our global widgets, custom widgets global and custom widgets bulletin specific. So much like our website designer, you can have a custom widget that is global to the bulletin, as in it can be reused in every single bulletin. And if you change it in any bulletin, it reflects in all of the other bulletins unless they've been archived. And we have custom widgets, which are bulletin specific, as in this widget is only available in this bulletin and it will not be available in any other bulletins unless it was a copy of that bulletin specifically. This is great for one-off things. Let's say you need a little blurb of text or some advanced HTML. These custom widgets will let you do that. And custom widgets they feature the least amount of force inness. So like our pre-formatted widgets really send you down the path that you've taken with them. But with custom widgets, you can do all of your own custom code, HTML. You're 100% on your own in that case, but it'll allow you to access some really powerful features if that's what you need. So for any reason, if you ever need really strong, you need to have the HTML formatted in a specific way, any of our custom widgets, either the global or the bulletin specific, will be the bulletin widget that you're looking for. So now just to come back to some of our widgets real quick, a lot of widgets that clubs really love and use almost exclusively in their bulletins are the things under our essentials, under essentials, things like the executives and directors, the bulletin stories, and then I would say also our not bulletin and PR, our upcoming events. So speakers and upcoming bulletin events. And the great thing about these widgets is that if someone else has taken the time to help maintain the club's website by entering more speakers, there's nothing you really have to do with this widget besides drag, drop, and place it into the system. I'm gonna hover over it here and make sure that all of its settings are good. It's gonna look up to 2 months. I don't want it to display any more than 3 speakers. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And I must not have any upcoming speakers right now on this account, which doesn't surprise me. This is one of our testing accounts. I'm also going to list our upcoming events here as well. And here you can see we have much more information, but I didn't have to do anything besides place this in here. So I don't want this many events to show. So I'm going to go into the properties for it again by hovering over it and clicking on it, the cog there, that is. And underneath here, we have a view entire list link. It says the items to display are 10. That is far too many for me. I don't, the club doesn't need to know about that many events coming up. I just want them to know about the next 3. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And here you can see we are showing our next 3 upcoming events with a link to view all of the additional upcoming events. The last widget I want to talk about in depth here is our stories widget. What's really great about the bulletin and the website story system is that as you create stories for your club's website, you can reuse those same stories in your bulletin. So if one person is taking care of posting all of the stories and stuff to ClubRunner and you have a bulletin editor, in theory, they could come in, grab some recent stories from the website. I'm going to go ahead and click this big button here to do that. And I can grab any of these stories that I like. So I'll grab this one about donation. I'll grab this one about the website content webinar. And I'll grab this bulletin story from Mickey from last year. So these are the 3 stories I want to pull in. And if I'm good with them, I can choose done after selecting them. And you can see here immediately those 3 stories were added to our bulletin here. And if I don't like the order that they're in, I can hover over them and grabbing our grab points here and rearranging them on the page. And of course, if any of the information in any of our stories needed to be updated, I could click into the story itself. And you can see there's not too much content here. So you know what, this story doesn't look like it's going to work for us. So let's pretend that all 3 of these stories weren't really what we were looking for, but we want to go ahead and create a new one. So I got rid of them all. I hit done. I actually shouldn't have done that. I'm going to hover over the widget again and click into it. And I am going to create a new story instead. For any of you who are familiar with our website editor, normally this is the exact same process. The only difference here is we're working directly in the bulletin without having to go back out to the the website section and specifically create a story. We can create it directly in the bulletin. So our bulletin story, we'll fill out our title here. The permalink will automatically generate based on our title, so we don't have to do anything. I would like to have a author here, so we're going to list it as Kevin Turner again. Right now, we can actually see that there's this cross, or this slash rather, through the eye icon, meaning that it's not visible. So I'm going to toggle it on so it is. Same thing for the date. I'm going to toggle it on, but of course you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Our last option here is social media, and this means to show the social media share bar. So if anyone goes and reads the full story description page, there will be a social media share bar, and it'll allow them to share this story onto their own timeline on their social media platform of choice. Moving on, we have our story brief. By default, this would be the first section of the story that is shown on the website and our bulletin. And then we also have our story content section, which will be the second half of the story. And for our bulletin, we can choose whether or not both the brief and the content show or just one or the other. So I'm going to, using the help of my Lipsum text here, I am going to put some information right into our story here. So I've got a brief and I've got a full story content. Coming up to the top here, we have one extra option. I do want to set a thumbnail image, so I'm going to click change here. I'm going to choose the edit option. This will pop up our image library again. I'm going to go ahead and pick a photo from our rotary images here. I'll go ahead and choose the current year presidential theme. And there is our story. We've got our title, we've got our author and date. We're going to show the social media share bar on the website. A feature that I didn't show off is if, for example, you have a story that you guys repeat each week and you make changes, you can actually copy a story wholesale and work on it as a brand new story. We have our brief, we have our content, and we have our blog settings here. So comments allows members of the club to come onto the story page and add comments, not comics. And then you can also enable or disable them. And if they're enabled and you no longer want to accept them, you can close them. The last section option here, we have our tags. These are only for the story listing page, so I'm not going to use any of them today. But I'm sure if you guys have any questions about that, we'll be happy to address them. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done here. We have now created a whole story for our bulletin. This is the only story I want in this bulletin, so I'm going to go ahead and hit done. And you'll see the page will flip back over. We have our first story, and we can see that actually all of the text, not just our brief text, is showing. Now, I only wanted to show the brief because I don't want this bulletin to feel too overwhelming. If someone wants more information about this story, they can definitely click on the title or the read more link and get that. So I'm going to hover over the widget and use the gear or cog icon here. Under the properties box, I am going to scroll down, and under content properties here, we can see that there are several different options about showing a brief and showing content. So I want the content off. I don't want the content to show. I only want the brief to show. And this is great when you have 3 or 4, maybe you have really big stories. You really only want that byline or that intro to show up in the bulletin. And this is really to make sure that you avoid any delivery options. There are email providers out there that have a maximum size for an email before they start to truncate it and make it like display it for people. So trying to keep your bulletin length down as far as all of the content in it is kind of an important thing. Under most circumstances, you'll probably never notice it, but if you ever do, you can always reach out to us and we'll help you identify why. But I definitely don't want the content to show here in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And we can see here now that this really cut down the length of my bulletin. In fact, it probably cut it in half. So let's keep moving right along here. I'm going to get rid of this widget. I'm going to drag this guy over here because we don't need, that looks okay. We'll go ahead and get rid of the speakers because I don't have any. And this is what we're going to leave our bulletin looking like for the time being. So before we get ready to talk about some of the stuff towards the end for previewing and testing, the last section I want to talk about is the text box. So every now and again, email clients don't support HTML emails. Typically, this tends to be a security setting, and some work environments may have it set up like this, where that you really aren't allowed to receive HTML emails. The really nice thing is, by default, you guys don't have to do anything. If that is the case, we will actually send a copy of the email. So when we prepare and send this email out, not only does it arrive in members' inboxes with an HTML version, if for some reason their email client doesn't support the HTML version, we will also send them this text. So sender first name. So in this case, Kevin. Kevin is also going to be sent. So Kevin from the Rotary Club of Purple Metro has sent you an email, but it appears your client only allows plain text. Please copy and paste the following link to view the contents of this email. What this URL will be when it arrives in members' inboxes, if they get this, is a direct link to view this email online so that their email client issues are alleviated. In most cases, you can probably leave this text version exactly as is, but if you do want to support them, support those users, you can write more or add more text here. That way, there's more of a description, but this is the default every time you create a new bulletin. So we are happy with our current bulletin. I am going to go ahead and go to the preview stage. So in the preview stage, the system is going to do its best to present you a copy of the bulletin in the state that it should arrive in users' inboxes. And from here, if we wanted to, we can hit send test to myself. And we will get a copy of this bulletin as it is sent directly to the email address our user is logged in with. Now, the last thing I do want to comment here before we move into the full sending part of the process is that the preview screen, this is what it will look like if it arrived in your email in your email client, or not your email client, rather, your internet browser. And the reason I want to call that out very specifically is email clients are not at the same level of sophistication of internet browsers. There's a lot of features and functionality they either can't support or just don't support. A very straightforward example about this would be embedded videos. Email clients do not support embedded videos. You can have a link that goes to a video platform to show them that video. You could potentially have a very tiny video and attach it directly to the outgoing email, but in the general sense, you can't embed a email you can't embed a video in an email. In fact, when you get into that state, we'll try and warn you that you have an embedded video and that it won't show up, but it would definitely work here on our preview page, but that's because we're viewing the email in a web browser, not an email client. So just keep that in mind.
So besides the preview, we also have send and the send test to myself. Now, let's say you aren't ready to send it, but you need to stop your work. You can go ahead and hit this save and exit. It will save all of the changes you are currently working on and exit the bulletin entirely. Something that I didn't touch on, and I want to apologize for this, is when we're working in the Bulletin Designer itself, almost everything we're doing is almost always immediately being auto-saved as soon as you stop interacting with it. So this save and exit is really I don't want to work on the bulletin anymore. I have no more changes that I need, and I need to go do something else. Use save and exit. Otherwise, work in the designer and everything shall be auto-saving. So let's go ahead and come to the send page so we can talk about selecting recipients and all of our final options when we send this bulletin out. So on this page, I'm an administrator, so I have full access to everything. So we have our grouping for our active and honorary members, including any of our custom membership types or default ClubRunner membership types, which we have satellite and corporate as custom active membership types. We have our other users list, so staff members or whatever you're using it for the club, inactive members, you have custom distribution lists, and you have contact groups. So of our first three categories, these are members in our club, and they're based on these categorizations. So active members, honorary members, other users, and inactive members. Most of the time, this is probably all your club would need to send it out to the majority of your membership. You can, of course, choose your other users as well. I would probably discourage you from sending it to your active members. There's nothing stopping you from doing so, but past members may not be super interested in your ongoing bulletins. If you have any custom distribution lists, this is effectively going to be a mirror of your active members or other users, because that is all custom distribution lists should have. But if you have non-club members, you can send it to any of them as well. So for example, we like to send our bulletins to all of our meeting guests. Clicking on that box will send it to all of our external contacts. Now, just to touch on something very quickly here, you can see both for for this active group and for this meeting guest group, you can see, even though we've checked the checkbox, we can see that only 4 out of 10 and 73 out of 93 up here are going to receive that email. And we can take a deeper look at that by clicking on expand. And now that we have this box up, we can see that Aaron Aronson, partner of Abe Aronson here, can't have their email selected. Now, if I hover over this box, it will actually tell us exactly why we can't email them. And in this case, Aaron doesn't have an email address in their profile, so we can't send them an email. Sean here, he also doesn't have an email. Here's a different one. Peter Bowman has opted out of bulletins. For both of these cases, if I knew the member's email address, or the member had told me, hey, why am I not getting our bulletins? I could go into that member's profile, add their email address or correct it, or go to their privacy tab and opt them back in so that they'll start getting those emails going forward. So once I have all of my recipients selected and I'm happy with it, I can make sure I go over my final options and finish processing the bulletin. So the system is asking me, do I want to archive this bulletin after sending it? In today's case, I'm going to choose no. Do I want a copy of this bulletin? I'm also going to choose no in this case, because my user is already in this list. But even if it wasn't, I would still only get one copy of the email. And just to touch on that for a moment, I do know sometimes you have members who may be sharing an email for some reason. The system will only ever send a single email in a batch to the same email address. So if you do have, for example, partners sharing an email, they'll only ever receive one of those emails. Ideally, they both have a unique email. The other way you could work around that is by sending it to everyone except that one person, and then doing it a second time and sending it just to them. So for the reply to, I'm going to have that come to me here at my test email address, and that's perfectly fine. If there was a different bulletin editor, as in I wasn't the person who was preparing and sending this, I could choose that, or I can even choose custom. So, Rotary Club of Purple Metro at. I'm just putting in a generic placeholder email. And now the last option here is whether I wanted to send now
or send later. If I choose send now and I hit this nice big send button, the system is going to start preparing and sending the bulletin out. If I choose to schedule it for later, and let's just pick today, and I'm going to send it later today at 5. So I'm going to put 05:00 p.m. The really important thing to pay attention to this scheduling is that this is the date that the bulletin will start sending, not being delivered at. So if there was some critical, let's say I needed it to arrive tomorrow morning and I wanted it to arrive in people's inboxes an hour or two before the meeting. So let's say our meeting's at 7:30. I want to make sure everybody sees this. I'd really want to send this out starting at like 5 a.m. in the morning. That way, under any reasonable circumstances, everyone should have this email who is capable of receiving it shortly after 5 a.m. So the only reason I bring that up is from time to time, we can be processing a very large volume of emails. You know, every now and again, a bunch of clubs and districts all choose to send a whole lot of email around the same time. And under most normal circumstances, you might see a delay of 5 to 10 minutes, maybe even 20 minutes. In some extreme cases, it could be longer, but I guess all I'm really saying is if there's a really critical time, make sure you give yourself some extra breathing room just in case there are any issues for delivery. So let's go ahead and just choose to send now. We are not going to archive this bulletin, so let's go ahead and hit send. And now it's just going to confirm for me, or am I sure I want to send it to 80 recipients? I'm going to hit OK. And we're done. So we have created a bulletin, put content in it, and sent it out to our membership. So just touching on that, we touched on stats a little bit earlier, but I'm going to touch on them again here. So I'm going to dive right into see delivery stats. And now you can see that there's a whole bunch of unknown information. This actually means that the email has started to have been processed and is in work of going out. So in just a little bit here, all of these users will have a bunch of emails, and a bunch of these are not going to deliver in these cases because they're just bad email addresses that they'll never get delivered. And that's how we have some of those set up. So I'm almost done here, and I know we're running just about up on our hour-long time. So I do apologize. I was hoping we'd have a couple minutes left towards the end, but I think we're going to end up running over. So let's talk about our last couple things that are really important: archival and bulletin templates. So I'm going to head to the View All Bulletins page, and we can see our two most recent bulletins here. This one that is still open, which is our Welcome New Member Bulletin, and our Club News July. Now, I really like the amount of time and effort that I put into this bulletin, and I've already received feedback from our club officers that they also really like the way it works. And going forward, this is the preferred format that they would like to use. So because I haven't archived this bulletin yet, I can save it as a template. So clicking on this more arrow and then choosing save as template, what it's going to do is it's going to create a new template based on this bulletin. So very straightforwardly, it is going to copy the bulletin and it's going to create it as a template. And here is our template. So if there were changes that we needed to make to the template, we can go right into that template. And, you know, hey, this is supposed to be our club logo, or, you know, hey, we're not supposed to be using this logo as a standalone. Let's get rid of it. So I can click off of it. And now it just won't be there. And if I needed to put something else in there, I could. I'd want to preview it. And then once I'm happy with the way the preview works for the template, I will save and exit. And I will confirm for you guys, you can fully work through bulletins as templates. The important thing, though, is templates cannot be archived. And the reason templates can't be archived is they're not intended to. So just use some caution with that. If you ever send a template, you won't be able to archive it. It won't show up in the list of bulletins. It does come up from time to time, so I figured I'd mention it now. And now that we've got our template, we've got our Club News July template, which I should probably rename as Club News Template or something like that. And I could definitely go do that. But I also want to make sure that this bulletin is stamped in stone and it's perfect. Nothing should change about it. It shouldn't be edited. It should live on the website going forward. So the last process I'd want here is I'd want to archive it. So it is going to tell you, warning, are you sure you want to archive it? Once it's archived, you won't be able to edit the bulletin. Now, to me, that's a win in my book because I don't want anyone to make any changes.
Now, you might be asking, why wouldn't you archive it right when you send it? I definitely know that there are clubs and groups out there that sometimes they may need to resend the same bulletin a few times, or maybe they'll have some corrections they want to make before they archive it. So effectively, as soon as you know that you aren't going to make any more changes to your bulletin, you should archive it. Usually you'd want to do that when you're sending, but at any time that you want to, you can come back and archive. The most important thing just to keep in mind with why templates and active bulletins is ClubRunner allows the club to have 24 active bulletins, and that is spread out between both your live bulletins, all of your bulletin groups, and your templates. So if you have 23 bulletin templates, you will only be able to have one active bulletin. So just keep that in mind. Ideally, you create your bulletin, you put your content in it, you send it out to your membership, and you archive it, and you repeat that process each week. The hardest thing that you guys will probably do if you don't have a bulletin is creating that bulletin that first time. And then once it's set up and everyone's happy with it, turn it into a template and continue forward with your success. So if we go and create a new bulletin one more time here, we can go to the My Template section, and we could choose Club News July. And when we continue with this process, it will pick up that bulletin and we can pick up right where we left off. So that is all of the big bulletin things. So I think I'm going to hand it over here to Sean to take over for any question and answers that any Q&A questions that have come up during the course of the webinar. So Sean, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Zach, for going over the bulletins, provided a lot of great information. So as Zach mentioned, we'll go ahead and get to the live Q&A section. So as the presentation was going along, we did have lots of great questions. I did try to answer them as we were going along. But of course, I did pick some questions here that were commonly asked so that we can discuss further here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And let's take a look. So the first question that we received here was in regards to the commitment section. So we had a few questions about what that commitment section is and how does it work. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So if we go to New Bulletin Beta and manage the bulletins, we're going to go ahead and let's just open up this existing bulletin here. Let's scroll down to the bottom. So at the bottom of this bulletin, we see that the commitments option is enabled. In order to control that, we do have the properties section. So on the very top right of the page here, we can click properties. And under website publishing, we have the show commitments option. So if I uncheck that, we do want to click this save button. You'll see that that show commitment section does disappear. So you can control if that show commitment section appears or not. So now that we know how to enable or disable it, let's talk about kind of what it does. So this show commitment section is a special section that is set up depending on the recipient. So I know one of the questions was, is this specific to an individual or does it list all of the commitments? So this is specific to the recipient. So if this bulletin is being sent to me and the commitments are enabled, I'll be able to see what commitments, upcoming commitments I have. So for example, if I signed up for a volunteer task, that would appear here. If I have a task in the meeting responsibility list, that will also appear here. So it's a great option if you do want to send that information to the individual members. And like I said, this information that does appear on the show commitment section is specific to the individual that is receiving it. So what happens is the system will generate that information at the time of sending it. And then that way, when the recipient gets the email, they'll see just their commitments. They're not going to see everybody else's. So a great tool to use if you want to, send reminders or information about what commitments the recipients have coming up. Okay, and we also had another question here, actually regarding this visible on website option, asking where would the bulletin be visible. So this visible on website controls our built-in bulletin page. So if we go to here at website content, we're going to click pages on the left. We click built-in pages again on the left. And we're going to see under the built-in pages. So these are pages that ClubRunner builds for you. We have the bulletin list page. So we're just going to go ahead and click view. And you can see we have our bulletin list here. So this is where they would appear. They do have to be published and they do have to have that checkbox enabled. So if we go back to the bulletin, go to properties, and that's what that visible on website option will control. So once this page is rendered and this bulletin is published, this bulletin will appear within this page. Right now, we don't have any set up, but once this page is rendered and the bulletin is published, it'll show up here. And then there was another related question, actually. Does archiving the bulletin still allow it to be listed on the website and through the bulletins widget? And the answer to that is yes. So if you do archive the bulletins, which we do strongly recommend, you can certainly still view them through the website as well as through the bulletin widget as well. So if it's archived or active, you can still see that there. But like I said, we do recommend archiving it. And yes, to answer the question directly, they will still appear as long as they are set up to do so. So you can certainly do that there. Okay. And we did have a couple of questions about the difference between the legacy bulletin designer, as well as the new bulletin beta, which we showed in today's webinar. So the big difference is with the new bulletin beta, we have this really nice live designer here on the left, where you can actually see the changes as you're making them. And if we go to the legacy bulletin designer, so if we click bulletin, go to manage bulletins, and we'll edit this one here. This is our legacy designer. So as you can see here, we only have the widget view. We don't actually have that really nice live preview section so that we could see kind of the changes as we make them. So whenever you guys are editing the bulletin or you're creating a new bulletin, we do recommend using the new bulletin beta system. And it is important to note that both the legacy bulletin designer as well as the new bulletin beta live designer will both edit the same information. So as you can see here, we're looking at that welcome new member bulletin, which is the same one we were looking at in the live designer version. So both of them can be used, but we do strongly recommend using the new bulletin beta live designer. And there's no need for you to worry about any setup or anything like that. You can go ahead, if you've been using the legacy designer and you want to try out the new version, you can go ahead and start right away and use that going forward. There's no need to set up anything or migrate or anything. It's all there for you. It edits the same information. So if you do use the legacy designer, certainly try to use the new bulletin beta, as it does have that really nice and easy to use live designer section. So you can kind of see the changes as you make them. So that covers all of the questions that we have for this live Q&A section. I do want to say thank you everyone for joining us today. If you guys do have any questions as you are working through the bulletin system or any other questions related to ClubRunner, you can certainly contact us. Our email here is support@clubrunner.ca. And if you do have any questions or you want to start a discussion amongst other ClubRunner users, you can certainly feel free to join us on our ClubRunner community, and you can access that using our clubrunnercommunity.com website. You'll be able to log in using the same login information that you use to log into ClubRunner. So certainly feel free to join us there, ask us any questions. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.